The Alpha King chose a powerful princess, but his wolf never stopped crying for the rejected Omega. The king's wedding day began with rain that refused to fall. The sky stayed gray and swollen all morning, as if even the clouds could not decide whether to release what they were holding. Ashborn Vale stood at his window and watched the courtyard fill with banners. Red and gold, the colors of his house, hung beside silver and blue, the colors of House Ironwood. Servants moved below like ants preparing for a storm they could feel but not see. Today he would marry Princess Sable Ironwood, and every wolf in the kingdom would call it the wisest match in 100 years. He did not feel wise. He felt like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, being told the view was beautiful, when all he could think about was the ground he used to stand on. 3 years earlier, that ground had a name: Mira. She was not a princess. She was not even the daughter of a minor lord. She was an Omega, the lowest rank in wolf society, born to a family with no pack, no land, and no voice in any council. When Ashborn first met her, she was kneeling in the mud outside his war camp, pressing a bandage to the arm of a wounded soldier twice her size, humming something under her breath to keep him calm. Ashborn had walked past a dozen healers that day. He stopped at her. "You're not one of my medics," he said. "No," she answered, not looking up. "I just don't like watching people suffer when I can help." It was such a simple thing to say, but something in him had gone very quiet and very alert at the same time, the way a wolf goes still before it understands why. That stillness became a habit. Every time his army passed through her village, he found reasons to stay a little longer. He told himself it was strategy. It was not strategy. It was her laugh, low and surprised, like she hadn't expected herself to be happy. It was the way she never once asked him for anything. Not favor, not protection, not gold, when everyone else in his life asked for something before they even said hello. For 2 years, they were something neither of them named, not mates, not promised. Just two people who found each other in the space between duties, like a secret, held gently so it wouldn't break. Then his father died, and the crown came to him heavier than he expected, and with it came the council, and with the council came math. Kingdoms are not held together by feelings, they told him. They are held together by treaties, by borders, by the strength of the family standing beside the throne. An Omega with no pack brings nothing to a kingdom at war. A princess from House Ironwood brings an army. He had believed them, or he had told himself he believed them, which felt the same at the time. The rejection ceremony was simple. It always is, when you don't let yourself feel it happening. He stood in front of Mira, in the same war camp where they'd met, and he said the words that severed a bond neither of them had officially claimed, but both of them had already built. Wolves do not need paperwork to know when something real exists. He felt it tear on his end. He saw it land on hers. She did not cry. That was the part he remembered most, the part that visited him at night more than anything else. She did not cry, did not argue, did not ask him to reconsider. She simply nodded, like she had always known this day was coming, and had already made peace with it long before he had. "I hope she's worth it," she said quietly. Then she turned and walked north, toward a town he'd never heard of, and he let her go, because a king is supposed to let things go when the kingdom asks him to. His wolf had never let her go, not for one single day. Now, 3 years later, standing in front of his window on his wedding morning, he could still hear her voice in the quiet parts of his mind, the parts that woke him at 3 in the morning and refused to be reasoned with. A knock came at his door. His advisor, Corwin, stepped in without waiting for permission, the privilege of a man who had served 2 kings and buried one of them. "The princess has arrived at the east gate," Corwin said. "Everyone is asking why the king isn't dressed yet." "I'm thinking," Ashborn said. "About what?" Ashborn didn't answer. Corwin, wise enough to know which silences to leave alone, closed the door softly behind him. The wedding happened the way weddings happen when they are built for a kingdom instead of 2 people. Ashborn stood at the altar in his father's crown, the metal cold and unfamiliar even after all this time. Princess Sable walked toward him in silver silk, her spine straight, her face calm, the picture of a woman who understood exactly what this marriage was for, and had made peace with that understanding long before she walked through the door. She was not cruel. That was something Ashborn reminded himself of often, because it would have been easier if she were. Sable was intelligent, capable, and fair in her own hard way. She would rule well beside him. She would never embarrass him, never weaken him, never ask him for more warmth than he had to give. In many ways, she was the safest choice a king could make. His wolf had no interest in safe. They said their vows in front of 2 kingdoms worth of witnesses. Ashborn's voice matched hers, steady and practiced, the voice of a man reciting words he had rehearsed 100 times, so they would not shake when it mattered. When the priest pronounced them bonded, a cheer rose through the hall loud enough to rattle the banners on the walls. Somewhere beneath his ribs, something old and stubborn pulled tight, like a rope tied to a memory he had tried to bury and failed. He didn't let himself look toward the servants' entrance at the back of the hall. He told himself there was no reason to look. He looked anyway. She wasn't there, of course. He had made certain of that himself, 3 years ago, when he sent her north and called it mercy. A small, honest part of him understood now that it had never been mercy at all. It had been fear, wearing mercy's clothes so he wouldn't have to look at it directly. That night, the castle filled with music and laughter, and Ashborn played the part of a satisfied king with the same practiced ease he'd used for the vows. He danced with Sable. He accepted congratulations from 100 lords who had never once asked whether he was happy, only whether the match was strong. Strength, it seemed, was the only currency anyone cared to measure. Near midnight, when the celebration had grown loud enough that no one would notice one man's absence, Ashborn slipped onto the balcony that overlooked the northern hills. The music faded behind the glass doors until it was just him, the cold air, and the quiet, insistent ache under his ribs that had never once, in 3 years, agreed to be quiet. He pressed a hand flat against his chest, as if he could hold the animal inside him still. It did not still. It never did. "You look like a man mourning at his own wedding," said a voice behind him. He turned. Corwin stood in the doorway, 2 cups of wine in hand, offering one without waiting to be asked. Ashborn took it, mostly so he'd have something to do with his hands. "I'm not mourning," Ashborn said. "Your wolf disagrees. I've served you long enough to see the difference between a satisfied king and a man carrying a stone in his chest." Ashborn didn't answer right away. He looked out at the dark hills, the direction Mira had walked 3 years ago, the direction his wolf still turned toward every single night, without asking his permission first. "Do you think it heals?" Ashborn asked quietly. "A bond that's been cut like that?" Corwin considered the question with the patience of an old man who had watched many kings ask many hard questions. "I think some bonds don't heal," he said. "I think some of them just get quieter, so a man can keep living beside the wound instead of on top of it. That's not the same as healing. It's just learning to carry weight without falling down." Ashborn said nothing. There was nothing comforting to say back, and Corwin hadn't offered comfort. He'd offered truth, which was rarer and, in its own way, kinder. "Do you know where she went?" Ashborn asked. "After I sent her away?" Corwin was quiet for a long moment. "A small village near the northern border. I checked, once, a year ago, just to know." "Why?" "Because I served your father, and I watched what happens to a king who buries something instead of resolving it. I didn't want to watch it happen twice." Ashborn closed his eyes. Below them, the music continued, bright and celebratory, utterly unaware of the conversation happening 1 floor above it. Somewhere in that hall, his new queen was likely searching for him, wondering where her husband had disappeared to on the one night he was supposed to be entirely hers. "I made my choice," Ashborn said, more to himself than to Corwin. "For the kingdom." "You did," Corwin agreed. "Kings often have to. That doesn't mean the choice doesn't cost something. It just means the cost gets paid quietly, over years, instead of all at once." Ashborn looked north one more time before turning back toward the light and music of his own wedding celebration. He would go back inside. He would dance again, smile again, accept congratulations again, because that was what a king did on his wedding night, whatever his wolf was doing underneath his skin. But before he stepped through the doors, he allowed himself one small, private moment, the kind he rarely permitted himself anymore. He thought of a girl kneeling in mud, humming to calm a frightened soldier, asking for nothing in return. He thought of her voice, steady and unbothered, telling him she hoped his choice would be worth it. He hoped so too. He hoped it every single day, because hoping was easier than admitting he already knew the answer. Inside, the celebration continued exactly as it was supposed to. A king had married a princess, 2 kingdoms had grown stronger, and everyone in the hall agreed it was a wise and powerful match. Only Ashborn knew that somewhere beneath the crown, beneath the vows, beneath the practiced smile he wore for his people, his wolf was still turned toward the north, still waiting, still refusing to accept that the story had ended the way the kingdom said it should. Some choices are made with a crown on your head. Some are made with a heart that never agreed to the terms. Ashborn had learned, standing on that balcony, that a king could rule an entire kingdom and still not have full control over the one part of himself that mattered most. He walked back inside to his celebration, carrying his quiet weight the way Corwin said he would have to, one steady step at a time, for however many years it took to learn how to hold it without falling.